In the years after the Civil War, Wilmington, North Carolina was a special place. It was the state's largest city, a busy port where ships came and went. Something remarkable was happening here. Black citizens and white citizens were building a life together in ways not seen in many other southern cities. They worked alongside each other on the docks and in the businesses that filled the bustling streets. This was a time of great change, a period known as Reconstruction, and Wilmington was a shining example of what the future could look like. The city was a place of opportunity, where progress felt real and tangible for everyone living there. The black community in Wilmington was thriving in this environment. They were not just laborers, they were business owners, doctors, lawyers, and skilled craftsmen. They owned homes, started newspapers, and built churches and schools that became the heart of their neighborhoods. Black men could vote, and because they did, they helped elect officials who represented their interests. The city government was biracial, meaning both black and white leaders worked together to run Wilmington. This shared power was a testament to the city's unique progress and a source of great pride for the African American community, who had built a prosperous middle class from the ground up. This cooperation created a unique political landscape. The local government was run by a fusionist coalition, a political party made up of white populists and black Republicans. They joined forces because they shared common goals. They believed in public education, fair wages for workers, and the right for all men to vote and participate in government. In Wilmington, this alliance was successful. They won elections and put people in power who looked out for the interests of both poor white farmers and the growing black population. The city was a beacon of what could be achieved when people focused on shared goals instead of racial division. However, this success was not celebrated by everyone. For some powerful white Democrats, the sight of black prosperity and political power was unacceptable. They saw black officials in City Hall, black policemen on the streets, and successful black businesses as a threat to their old way of life. They believed in white supremacy, the idea that white people should hold all the power and control society. They saw the fusionist government as a mistake that needed to be corrected, and they were willing to do anything to restore what they considered the proper order. This growing resentment created a dark cloud that was slowly moving over the hopeful city of Wilmington. The plan to take back control was led by a group of determined white supremacists. These were not just angry men in the shadows, they were some of the most powerful and respected white leaders in North Carolina. Men like Alfred Moore Waddell, a former congressman, and Josephus Daniels, a newspaper editor, used their influence to spread fear and hatred. They held rallies and gave speeches, telling white citizens that their way of life was in danger. They claimed that black men were a threat to white women, and that the fusionist government was corrupt and incompetent. Their goal was to unite white voters under one single cause: the removal of all black political influence. Newspapers became their most powerful weapon in this campaign of fear. Josephus Daniels' newspaper, the News and Observer, printed stories and cartoons every day that were designed to make white people angry and scared. These articles often told lies about black people, portraying them as dangerous and unfit to govern. The newspapers created a constant drumbeat of racist propaganda, repeating the message that white men needed to stand up and redeem the state from Negro rule. This relentless campaign poisoned the minds of many white citizens, turning neighbors against neighbors and replacing the city's spirit of cooperation with one of suspicion and growing hostility. The white supremacists also organized armed groups called Red Shirts. These men were like a private army for the Democratic Party. They rode through the countryside on horseback, carrying rifles and intimidating anyone who supported the fusionist government. They broke up political meetings, threatened black voters at their homes, and made it clear that there would be violence if the upcoming election did not go their way. The Red Shirts were a visible symbol of the brute force that the white supremacy campaign was prepared to use. Their presence ensured that the election of 1898 would be held under a cloud of terror. As the election on November 8, 1898 approached, the tension in Wilmington was at a breaking point. The white supremacist leaders had made their intentions clear. They published a document called the White Declaration of Independence, stating that they would no longer be ruled by black men. They demanded that the editor of the local black newspaper, the Daily Record, leave the city. They promised that if they did not win the election, they would take control of the city by force the next day. The stage was set for a violent confrontation, one that would change Wilmington and American history forever. On the morning of November 10, 1898, 2 days after the election that the Democrats had won through fraud and intimidation, the violence began. Alfred Moore Waddell led a mob of hundreds of armed white men to the office of the Daily Record, the city's black-owned newspaper. The editor, Alexander Manley, had already fled for his life, but that did not stop the mob. They broke down the doors, smashed the printing press to pieces, and then set the building on fire. The flames that destroyed the newspaper office were a signal to the entire city that the promised takeover was now happening. The rule of law was gone, replaced by the rule of the mob. From the newspaper office, the violence spread like wildfire through the city's black neighborhoods. The white mob, which grew to nearly 2,000 men, marched through the streets, shooting at any black person they saw. They were not just a random crowd, they were an organized force with a clear mission. They moved with military precision, using a Gatling gun, a rapid-fire machine gun, to terrorize the community. Black men who tried to defend their homes and families were gunned down in the streets. The exact number of people killed is unknown, but historians estimate that as many as 60 African Americans were murdered that day in a brutal massacre. While the massacre was happening in the streets, another part of the coup was taking place at City Hall. Alfred Moore Waddell and a group of his followers stormed the building and confronted the legally elected officials. At gunpoint, they forced the mayor, the board of aldermen, and the police chief, both the white and black members of the fusionist government, to resign. It was a complete overthrow of a democratic government. Waddell immediately declared himself the new mayor, and his men took over all the positions of power. This was not a riot. It was a carefully planned coup d'etat, the only successful one in the history of the United States. By the end of the day, the city was under the complete control of the white supremacists. The legally elected government had been destroyed and replaced by an illegal one. Wilmington's biracial democracy was over. The streets were quiet, but it was the quiet of fear and death. The city that had once been a beacon of hope and progress was now a place of terror for its black citizens. The coup was complete, and the leaders of the mob were now the leaders of the city, having seized power through bloodshed and violence. The promise of Wilmington had been brutally extinguished in a single day. The violence and the coup were just the beginning of the tragedy. In the days and weeks that followed, the new white supremacist leaders began a campaign to erase the black community's presence and power permanently. They drew up a list of successful black leaders and prominent white allies who had supported the fusionist government. These men were rounded up, marched to the train station at gunpoint, and banished from Wilmington forever. They were forced to leave behind their homes, their businesses, and their families. This act of banishment was designed to strip the black community of its leadership and leave it vulnerable and powerless. The economic devastation was just as severe. The white mob had not only murdered people but had also destroyed the heart of the black business district. Homes and businesses were looted and burned, destroying decades of hard-earned wealth. The black middle class that had been a source of pride for Wilmington was shattered. Many families who lost everything had no choice but to flee the city. It is estimated that more than 2,100 black citizens left Wilmington in the weeks following the massacre. They became political refugees in their own country, searching for safety and a new place to call home. Wilmington's population changed, and so did its future. For many decades, the true story of what happened in Wilmington was buried. The white leaders who planned and led the coup wrote the history themselves. They called it a race riot and falsely claimed that they were responding to violence started by black citizens. They portrayed themselves as heroes who had saved the city from Negro domination. This false narrative was taught in schools and printed in history books for generations. The story of a violent overthrow of a government was hidden, and the victims were silenced. This silence allowed the injustice to stand, and the city's painful past remained a secret known only to the families who had suffered through it. Understanding the Wilmington Insurrection of 1898 is crucial because it reveals a dark and often ignored part of American history. It shows how racial violence was used to steal political power and destroy black progress. The coup in Wilmington helped create new segregation laws, known as Jim Crow laws, across North Carolina and the South, which denied black citizens their rights for more than 60 years. The event is a powerful reminder that democracy is fragile and that progress can be violently reversed. Remembering Wilmington means honoring the victims, facing the truth of the past, and understanding how these historical injustices continue to affect communities today.